I used to be a police officer, and for years I patrolled a town not far from my home. Though it's been a long time, one bizarre memory remains vivid. During an overnight shift in the late 1990s, I was working solo in my cruiser. My patrol area was mostly spread out and rural, so it stayed pretty quiet. Once the early evening rush faded, the late night hours became significantly still, with traffic on the roads thinning out. Having nothing specific to do, I decided to pull into a common spot for police to monitor. It was a winding road right next to a large forest. People frequently sped there, often going 20 or 30 miles over the limit. There was a gravel patch near the trees where we'd sit to catch speeders. It was a perfect spot because a squad car was nearly invisible there at night. I parked facing the road about 20 feet back. To my right were the woods, and to my left was a grassy field dotted with trees and bushes. As I sat there, the road stayed silent, with maybe only 2 or 3 cars passing every minute. About 10 minutes passed in total silence. Suddenly, a massive thud hit the back of my car. I caught a glimpse of something large in the rear window for a split second, followed by a noise that sounded like a heavy kick to the chassis. I saw a figure briefly through the glass, but it happened so fast. I saw them start to run away and realized a large rock had been hurled at my window. I jumped out and sprinted around the car, but the person was already disappearing into the tree line. I chased after them into the woods, shouting that I was the police and ordering them to stop. They didn't listen. They kept bolting through the brush with me right behind them. The growth was thick, but I could hear them ahead of me. I couldn't see them, and they seemed fast, likely familiar with the terrain. I kept running and yelling for them to stop, but I never truly saw their face or knew exactly which way they were heading. After more than a minute of chasing, the sounds of their footsteps grew faint. It was hard to track because my own movement through the trees was making so much noise. Eventually, I lost them. I radioed for backup and continued searching on foot, but the woods went silent. I scanned with my flashlight and kept calling out, but found nothing. After a few more minutes, I headed back to the cruiser. When I reached the car, I confirmed that a large rock had indeed hit the rear glass. It hadn't shattered, but it was damaged. There was also a dent in the bumper from the kick. I waited for backup to arrive, and once they did, we searched the woods together. We had no luck, so we drove to a few nearby properties that the woods led to. We knocked on doors, but no homeowners had seen or heard a thing. Whoever did it had vanished, and the mystery was never solved. To this day, I wonder why someone would have the nerve to attack a police vehicle like that in the middle of the night. Story Toonsy, the apartment officer. A very creepy event took place just last year. For context, I'm a woman living alone in a decent apartment complex where I've been for several years. One night around 10:00 p.m., there was a knock at my door. It was unusual to get a visitor that late. I looked through the peephole and saw a police officer standing there. He was tall, strong, and looked fairly young. I opened up, and he gave a name I can't recall, stating he was with the department. He told me he was investigating a hit and run involving my vehicle. He asked for my car's make and model, and when I told him, he confirmed that was the one. I park in a garage under the building, and while it seemed odd, my spot is near the entrance. So a collision was possible. He claimed he hadn't seen the surveillance footage yet, but had witness accounts, and he wanted me to come down to the car to handle insurance details. I agreed and left the apartment with him. I was stressed, wondering how bad the damage was. As we walked toward the elevator, I asked for more info. He said a car had hit mine while exiting and then fled. I didn't notice which button he pressed in the elevator, But when we reached the lobby, he started walking toward the exit. I followed at first, but then realized my car was in the garage, not the outdoor lot. That was the first red flag. When I told him my car was in the garage, he claimed it had been towed for the investigation. That was the second red flag, but I was more confused than suspicious at that point. As we walked through the quiet parking lot, I realized there were no police cruisers anywhere. That's when it hit me that this was sketchy. We were walking toward a group of civilian cars, and I asked where his vehicle was. He claimed he was working undercover that night. That was red flag number 3. I began to suspect he wasn't a real cop, even though his uniform looked legitimate enough to my untrained eye. I knew I had to get away. I told him I really had to use the bathroom and asked to go back inside. He said we weren't going far, but I insisted I couldn't wait. I started walking back to the building without waiting for an answer. He followed me back inside, into the elevator, and all the way to my door. He followed me right into my apartment, which made me incredibly nervous. I went straight to the bathroom and locked the door. He waited right outside the bathroom door in the hallway, rather than staying by the entrance. I immediately called 911. I told the operator about the supposed crash at my complex and asked if they knew anything. While on the phone, the man knocked on the door and asked what I was doing. I stayed silent. He tried the handle. The operator confirmed there was no report of a crash. I told her a fake cop was in my home. I heard him try the door a few more times before he quickly walked away and left the apartment. I waited until I heard the front door close, then ran out to lock it. Real officers arrived shortly after, but the man was gone. My car was perfectly fine in the garage. The whole thing had been a ruse to get me into his car. I'm just glad I followed my gut and went back upstairs. Story 3. The empty car. In my time as a police officer, I've had some very strange encounters, but one from when I was a rookie still gives me the creeps. I had only been on the job a couple of years, mostly working nights in a city that was a mix of residential and rural areas. One night, I spotted a car with no license plates, no temporary tags in the window either, so I moved to pull it over. When I flipped on my lights, the car didn't stop, it sped up. I prepared for a pursuit. We went about half a mile down the road before the driver made a sharp right onto a much quieter street. I followed with my sirens blaring. The driver then took an extremely sharp turn, nearly losing control, and suddenly jerked the car into a ditch on the side of the road. Before I could even stop behind him, the driver's door swung open. A man hopped out and vanished into the thick woods within a second. I jumped out and yelled for him to stop, but he had too much of a head start. By the time I reached the trees, he was deep in the brush. It was too dark and dense to see anything, so I decided to stay by his car and wait for backup. Backup arrived quickly, and we searched the area, but the suspect was gone. We even brought in a K9 unit, but we found nothing. When we looked in the car, it was eerie. The vehicle was completely empty. No registration, no personal items, nothing. It was a total ghost car. Over the next few days, it got weirder. The VN led to a defunct dealership that didn't even know the car was missing. A few nights later, I finished my shift and went home. On my front door was a handwritten note that said, "Better luck next time." It was terrifying to realize that the man I chased had somehow found out where I lived. I didn't have cameras back then, and despite reporting it, the case was never solved. Story 40. The gas station guard. Years ago, I used to work a lot of late shifts. I didn't like our break room, so I'd usually spend my downtime sitting in my car. During one shift around 11:00 p.m., I realized I'd forgotten my lunch, so I drove to a nearby 24-hour gas station to grab a snack. It was a large station and very quiet at that hour. I was sitting in my car, eating and watching YouTube, when a man in a uniform approached my window. I hadn't seen a patrol car, so I figured he came from the other side of the building. His uniform looked like a police outfit, but something felt off about it. He asked what I was doing, and I told him I was on my break. He asked if I worked there. I said no and told him where I actually worked. Suddenly, he ordered me out of the car, claiming he smelled drugs. This was a complete lie, as I've never done drugs in my life. I asked him if he was even a real cop, and he just told me not to worry about it. He tried my door handle, but it was locked. He then reached through my partially open window. I quickly rolled the window up, and he began banging on the glass, telling me to open up. I told him I'd open the door if he showed me a badge. He pulled something out of his pocket, but I honestly didn't know what a real badge was supposed to look like, so that didn't help. He kept insisting I was being difficult, and told me to stop wasting his time. When I pulled out my phone to call 911, he started losing it, hammering on the window and trying the handle violently. I didn't want the glass to break, so I threw the car into reverse and backed away. He chased me for a second before running off. I drove back to my job and waited for the real police. They eventually caught the guy and confirmed he was a serial impersonator with a criminal record. I'm just thankful I didn't let him into my vehicle.